the lessons that we're teaching in basketball are the lessons that you learn when your program competes for championships. Okay, the lessons that you have to learn as a player when you're in a program that's competing for a championship is what moves you on. That's a big part of your education in life.
I'm Corey Baldwin.
And I'm Dan Searle, and it's another episode of Off the Beaten Path, our podcast about hoops, about basketball coaches who have been living in obscurity, working in obscurity, even those who have made it out of obscurity. And today's guest, who is then, after being at the top of his game, gone into his own little world, and he's going to tell us all about it. What kind of place are we operating in here, Corey?
Well, it's a place where we're going to get some storytelling, connecting, food for thought and food for the belly. And Coach are right there in his, looks like in his upstairs house. When he came to Clayton, I'll give a quick story. He had to have his own office at his house because he did not have his own office at Clayton State. We shared a closet, me, Coacher, and Brent Buchanan, and players coming in and out. So he did a lot of film there and ended up probably being the nicest room of the house, right, Coach? Even though Miss G may get mad if I say that.
Yeah, she says it's a dust storm up here. But and I get mad when the cleaning person comes through and they move stuff. Okay, I don't want anything moved. I want it to stay right where it is.
I like it. So, all right, Coach Gibbons, go walk us through. We're just gonna get started. When you're from Tampa, but you ended up going to prep school, and you end up going to college at Springfield, a big phys ed program up there. So take over, walk us through some stuff, and we'll jump in and out with you.
Right. Well, my family and I, we made the decision that I was going to go to Springfield College in Springfield, Massachusetts, because at the time in the early 60s, it was the #1 physical education school in the country. Still is a great school, but they've gone a little bit more liberal arts. At the time I went there, 90% of the students were phys ed students, one way or the other. Kinesiology might have been their goal, athletic training might have been their goal. But we would have physical education skill classes. You had to take 2 each semester, and you would dress out and actually perform skills in particular. Like you might have track, and you had to pole vault, and you had to do all the different skills. I remember the wrestling was my favorite story. I'm taking wrestling phys ed skill class, and they match you up with partners. And I got this guy, I probably weighed 175 at the time. I got this guy that was like a 160 wrestler, okay? And so he would demonstrate, we would demonstrate a move, and, the instructor would watch us. And this guy just would wear me out. So I'd like say things to him like, hey, easy, man, easy. And the next time, just boom, boom. But coming out of Springfield, you could coach any sport, and you had learned the skills to teach. Like, I could teach pole vaulting, I could teach high jumping, in other sports, volleyball, that I had never really played. You learned not only how to play them, but actually how to teach them. Mm-hmm. And that was really a neat thing. Another thing about Springfield is the average was 12 jobs for every graduate. So if you were graduating, you had your choice of 12 PE jobs somewhere. Most of them were in the Northeast, but I ended up, because of the Vietnam War, I ended up coming back home, coming back south, because I had to go through the whole draft process. And
you played there too, right, Coach? You played at Springfield, correct? Who was your coach there? Who was your coach?
Well, Dr. Ed Stites, who is an infamous coach, was the head coach when I got there. and I played on the freshman team. Then he retired, and Ed Billick was the coach. And both Ed Stites and Ed Billick were national figures with the rule book, the rules committee. And a lot of the rules that have changed, 70s, 80s, 90s, including, instituting the 3-point line, the wider lane, came from my college coaches. But I can remember one time we were playing at UConn. Now, back then, UConn was in the Yankee Conference, not the Big East. And we had an official, and there was a particular, we had played freshmen before, and I'm sitting behind the bench watching the varsity game. The official made a call, and Ed Stites called the official over and said, "That's wrong." And the guy said, No, coach, I got it right. He said, "I know the rule. I wrote it."
That's pretty good.
And he's not lying. Most coaches say that, and they're making it up. This guy actually wrote the rule.
He said, "I wrote the rule."
So you end up down in Florida, Coach. Your first team, you were coaching in high school. You had a player that I guess you might have illegally recruited, or you just got lucky and landed there. He was related to you, correct?
Yes, it was my younger brother, who we now call in the family Uncle John O. Okay, my brother John, and he happened to be one of the better players. But I had to tell the parents in a parent meeting, and I was 23, just turning 24 when I got that job. So and back then, Corey, and you can relate, being in Henry County and so forth. Back then, you didn't just get a high school coaching job at age 22 or 23. Like, for example, in Tampa, there were only 5 high schools, in a city that, at that time was probably 150,000 people. And there were a lot of guys waiting for those coaching jobs, guys that have been JV coaches maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years. So I was lucky. They wanted an ex-college player. That's what the principal was looking for, somebody that had played in college, because they were having problems with parents and the previous coach. So
you mean they had problems with parents even back then, Coach?
Well, I think there's probably been parents forever. Back then, I'd say less problems than you have today.
Yeah.
But you still had parent problems, and that's how I got lucky. Now, it's kind of interesting. Everywhere I've been, where I've taken a new job, the first year we've been great.
And your brother ended up playing for Chuck Daly, right?
Right. My brother played. Listen to this. He got an Ivy League admittance to the University of Pennsylvania, and Ivy League, and still today there are no scholarships. But Penn in the early 70s went to 2 Final Fours. Okay, lost to North Carolina 1 year. Chuck Daly was the head coach, and Rolly Massimino was the assistant coach. So my brother my brother John O, he played for both those guys, and he has great stories,
Corey, that might be a future guest here on Off the Beaten Path.
Get Uncle Jono in.
Uncle Jono playing for Chuck Daly and Rolly Massimino.
I like.
He would love telling stories. But
so, Coach, you coach high school. How many years were you at that high school?
So I was at that high school for 8 years. And here's the interesting thing about that. So I went from age 23 to, like 30, 31 at that school. And we went to 3 Final Fours. Now in Florida at the time, there were only 4 classifications. And it was 2A, 2A, A, B, and C. And, it was really, really hard to get to a Final Four. I mean, you were going through some people. Now, here's another thing that happened the year that I got the head job in 70, 71 was the first year of integration in Florida. And so now what you had is some of the black high schools that had, kids had all gone to those schools. Some of those schools were allowed through exemptions to continue for the next couple of years before they, before busing and everything was locked into each county in Florida. So some of the schools that you would play in Class A were bears. Okay, they were bears. They were schools that had, played in the Black National High School Championships and so forth. So it was a real interesting time period. The whole integration thing and how that was all going to work out.
And how many years did you do high school total? I know you jumped in and out a couple of times after that, but how many years total?
13 years.
13 years at 2 high schools, right?
At 2 high schools, yeah.
And what were the 2 high schools? Jesuit and
Tampa Catholic. And ironically, Jesuit Tampa Catholic was Clayton Kennesaw State. It was the same level of rivalry because all the kids, I don't know, there were 15 or 16 Catholic elementary schools. All the kids from those schools chose to either go to Jesuit or Tampa Catholic. So when the teams would play, the stands were packed because everybody knew everybody. I mean, it was kind of an interesting rivalry. And that first year, that 70-71 year, games would be 8 o'clock tip back then. 8 o'clock tip. Games sold out at 5 o'clock. Okay. and fairly big gyms, maybe 1,800, 2,000. Yeah. And but we won both games. And not only did we win 20 games that year, but we beat Tampa Catholic twice. So that was a big rivalry. So then when I ended up years later at Tampa Catholic, it was pretty hard for the Jesuit guys. A lot of those guys still haven't forgiven me.
Yeah, well, how did that happen? You talk about the intensity of this rivalry. It's Coach K going to coach at Carolina. That's not going to happen. How did you get pulled across town?
Well, here's the thing. Coach K going to Carolina, he's probably pretty good friends with the Carolina AD. And that was kind of my situation because I left I left Jesuit in 1978, and I was hired as an assistant at the University of South Florida. And I was there for a number of years, and I worked for one head coach. I was the interim head coach for half of a year. Then I was not selected as the head coach. A new coach came in, and he retained me on the staff. And I worked with him for a year. And then I was involved in an NCAA inquiry. And as a result, I left the coaching staff, and that's when I went to Tampa Catholic. And the reason I got hired there was I knew the principal and I knew the athletic director. And but the rivalry still stayed the same. And when I first came to Tampa Catholic, there were a lot of teachers there that weren't so sure they wanted to associate with me.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Coacher, give us some alumni that may have came through Jesuit and Tampa Catholic during your time. I know both of them have had some other sports and just other people. Who are some of the alumni that maybe you taught or coached?
Well, I can remember walking through the halls when I first got to TC, and I saw this big, good-looking athletic guy. And I said to him, "Hey, are you playing basketball this year?" And he said, "No, Coach, I'm just going to play baseball." Tino Martinez. Tino Martinez. He said, "No, Coach, I think I'm just going to stick with baseball."
That's pretty good right there. So your time at South Florida, Coach, who was the coach that hired you there to be an assistant?
The coach that hired me there, his name was Chip Connor. And he had come, South Florida started basketball. Their first year ever playing NCAA basketball was 70-71, which was my first year as a high school coach at Jesuit.
What was that like, Coach? Because Tampa was so different back then. South Florida now is it's a big football school, technically, I guess. And they play in they've moved leagues about every other year, it seems like. But what was that like then, Tampa?
Yeah, there's been a lot of change. Now, what was really interesting then, when we went there, we were in the old Sun Belt Conference, okay? And the commissioner of the conference name was Vic Bubis. He lived in the same complex that I lived in. So because the Sun Belt offices were in Tampa. So I got to know him and his wife, and they helped me along, in my career to some extent. But what Vic Bubis, a couple of things that he brought to the Sun Belt, he said, you're not going to play in the small little gyms like Georgia State Gym. You're playing in the Omni. Georgia State's playing in the Omni. University of New Orleans is playing in the Superdome. And little South Florida, you're not playing in your little gym that was built for PE. You're playing downtown convention center in Tampa. So that was kind of a neat thing. Now, the schools in the league then were all in the major cities in the South. Okay, you had Georgia State, you had Jacksonville University, you had South Florida in Tampa, you had South Alabama was in Mobile, you had UAB was in Birmingham, and so travel for us, of course we didn't have charters or anything like that. We were into Atlanta and out to, to Mobile or to Birmingham, or UNC Charlotte was in the league, and they were really the best team in the league in the years that I was at U.S.S.R.
So how was it being a head coach, from 23 to 31 to now saying, hey, slide over a seat. Granted, you moved up to college, but now you're an assistant. What was that like, your first, an old dog learning new tricks per se at 31?
Or somebody telling you what to do and how to do it when it's not your call anymore. Yeah. How did the ego manage that?
It was real hard. It was real hard. And the other thing about it was I had a couple of really good basketball friends, guys that had been involved with the program, boosters, I guess you would call them, when I was at Tampa Jesuit. And I'd sit around with those guys and just say, well, I might do things differently if I was the coach. But I matured a lot in those years and learned just how big this game is, and that there's a lot more to it than X's and O's. I think that's the thing that I really learned, that the head coach in college has a lot of responsibilities, and it's not just leaving your classroom in high school and going to the gym for a 3:00 practice. College is, I learned completely different. He was speaking, like you do now, Corey. He was speaking at noon somewhere in the Tampa Bay area every day, and rushing back to practice and not really. Maybe he didn't even make the practice plan up that day, and then the whole thing about being able to get players in school and all those kind of things that I really didn't think that much about as a high school coach. But yeah, it was an interesting experience, but very hard to go from a head coach to being an assistant coach. I don't care what anybody says, it's hard.
Yeah, because usually it's the other direction, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Once you did that, Coach, did you know from that point forward you were going to try your darndest to be a college coach? Did it give you those juices, or was it really wasn't a thought at that time?
Yeah, I thought that I had moved up a level. I'll tell you a really interesting story. Okay. when I was a Jesuit, we had been to 3 Final Fours. Florida was, a relatively, population-wise smaller, but not many Division I colleges in Florida. Even today, for the size of the state, not many. But back then in the 70s, there was Florida, Florida State, Jacksonville, Stetson, U.S.S.R. That was it. Miami did not have basketball at the time. There was no FAU, FIU. I mean, it was just those schools. So I went to watch one of my high school players play, and I want to say it would have been about 76 or 77. And I was in the restroom standing right beside the coach from Stetson, who is the father of basketball in Florida. His name is Glenn Wilkes. And Dr. Glenn Wilkes, I had been, and I want to say he coached at Stetson for 35 years, but played at Mercer too, by the way. But anyway, I went to Dr. Glenn's clinic every summer. I'd talk to him, I'd ask him questions, basketball, this and that. My teams had been in 3 Final Fours, and I'm in the restroom next to him, and he didn't even know who I was. And I knew right then that I wasn't going from high school to college. Okay, when the number one, or there's only 5 schools in the state, the guy doesn't even know who I am. So the move to go to USF, I thought, if I'm ever going to go to college, this is what I want to do, or this is what I've got to do. Now, one of the things that's kind of interesting, Corey, and talking to you over the years, what I really wanted was to be a head junior college coach at Hillsborough Community College in Tampa. That was the job I really wanted. And I thought I would like to be there for 25 years. So, so going to South Florida, it wasn't like I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to be the next coach at Florida or Florida State, but I knew that I had to get into college in order to move.
And you did, but then you came back through, and from the high school ranks to the college ranks, but also some AAU, some travel ball. What's the backstory on Florida travel ball back in the day, Coach Gibbons?
Well, yeah, let me tell you that, because I really think this, in the lesson of, being in the restroom with Coach Wilkes, after I left South Florida, and we were involved in NCAA inquiry, and the athletic director and the coaches thought it'd be best for me. And by the way, I did not do anything against NCAA rules, but if the NCAA says you did, then you did. Okay, if they said Larry Brown did something, then Larry Brown did something. Larry Brown does have a completely different story, kind of the same in my situation. But I was able to land on my feet with the job at Tampa Catholic. Now, what came together at that time was there was a gentleman who was putting together the Team Florida AAU program. And what he wanted to do was make it the best program in the country, because this particular gentleman felt like Florida players weren't appreciated nationally. It was kind of like everybody thought Florida's a football state. They don't have any basketball guys, and the only good basketball players, are in the big cities up east. And I remember this is interesting. When I first, and it goes into this whole AAU thing. When I first went to South Florida, I was interviewing, with one of the vice presidents. They wanted to meet the new coach and this and that and the other. And the assistant to the vice president for student affairs was a former Globetrotter, big 6'11", I can't remember his name now, but big 6'11" guy, good guy. And I remember he asked me, all right, coach, you're going to be recruiting. You're going to be going up east, DC, Philly, New York. I said, no, I'm recruiting Florida. I'm recruiting right here. I think the best players in the country are right here. And the guy didn't really like that, but that was the thought in the 70s and the 80s. So what Team Florida became a mission for both myself and the director. We're going to beat everybody. And I really think my legacy in coaching is Team Florida. I think it took me from being a nobody assistant at South Florida, even though I was the interim head coach for about half the season. We didn't talk about that, but the Team Florida got me in front of every college coach in the country. It came in during that time period, and we were really good. We won the national championship in '83, and we had Otis Smith and Vernon Maxwell. Otis Smith, the former general manager of the Magic, and Vernon Maxwell, who was a player all over the league, but was on those really good Houston teams.
Houston.
But
Otis Smith too.
That really helped me in my career more than anything else, more than the high school success in high school and so forth. And while I was coaching Team Florida, I was coaching Tampa Catholic at the same time. So that was an interesting.
I bet that was, but similar experience for me, a different era, but coaching U.S.S.R's AAU program and out of Atlanta is what gets you in front of college coaches, gets those connections. Why? Because you've got players, because they're coming up for players. So, yep, I hear you, Coach.
Hey, two quick questions, Coach, after we went through that. How was it when you were the interim head coach? Give us a little of that. But how hard was it after being an interim head coach and all the previous head coaching experience to go back again to being an assistant? That had to be tough too. So those are the two. Tell a little bit about your interim head coaching time. I know you had PG out there playing for you, so we got to hear a PG story in case he listens. He'd be mad if we didn't tell one. And then kind of go through how hard it was to transition back.
Yeah, what happened, or how I became the interim head coach, is we got beat at South Alabama in our first conference game by 40. And it was a Sun Belt TV game, and it was on Saturday afternoon. And so what happened is, it was a Saturday afternoon game. We had, I think we spent the night and then flew back in the next day. But I remember we got into Tampa Airport, and the vice president for student affairs, who oversaw athletics, met the plane. And he had tough loss yesterday, guys. He said, I want the whole staff in my office at 8 a.m. tomorrow. So
Never good.
We knew things were probably not good, but what we thought was that he was going to say, look, if you don't turn this around, you guys are done at the end of the year. But we walked into that meeting, and he said to the head coach and the top assistant, we're letting you guys go today. And Coach Gibbons, we'd like you to stay on as the interim head coach. Well, I felt like, I'm looking out of the side of my eyes at the other two coaches. And so the head coach, Chip Connor, said to the vice president, Mr. Vice President, can we meet in the side room here for a second? And we went in the side room, and he said, here's what we're doing. And he said to me, Coach, you need to take it. You need to take it and go with it, and we'll be fine, but so forth. So that's how that happened. So we were already into the conference season. I want to say it was the middle of January. And I think I coached 13 games, but they're not, two things, they're not counted on my record because I was technically not the head coach. I think we went 2-11. We did beat Georgia State. Roger Couch was the head coach. We beat Georgia State in my opening game at home in the downtown convention center. And then we won our last game of the year at home against Stetson, which was Dr. Glenn Wilkes. But
you might know who you are now, right?
in the meantime, we had a couple L's in there. But the one thing that was different was the team got a shot in the arm with the firing. And, because a lot of times what happens is not that they didn't, because they really liked the head coach and really respected him. But when the coach gets fired, a lot of times the players realize that, I think the players realize sometimes that we got the guy fired by not performing. And that was kind of, we got that shot in the arm, and the guys really played well down the stretch. But at the end, I really thought, because we had a really good recruiting year going, I thought that that I had a real good chance being a Tampa guy to get the head job. But Lee Rose, who was the head coach at Purdue and took Purdue, he had a really good player named Joe Barry Carroll, and he had a guard named Seasting that ended up playing for the Celtics on that team. He went to the Final Four, but was having, problems with the AD, with his AD, or didn't get along. I don't know the whole thing. So he called South Florida right while the search was going on and recommended one of his assistants. And so the AD said to him, "Well, Lee, what about you?" And he said, "Well, yeah, I would have interest." So anyway, that happened, and then he retained me, and with the guys that we brought in, we were able to keep all the recruits. Nobody transferred, and but Penny was a senior, so Penny was out, but out and about as he still is.
PG.
Penny Green.
So Coacher, how was that working for two different guys after not being an assistant for anyone? Now you've been an assistant for two different guys. What were the major differences, and what did you learn to do, and what did you learn that you didn't want to do, as a head coach?
The one thing that I learned from Lee Rose, Lee Rose was in the office at 7:00 in the morning. Okay. And he was the last one to leave. And if he gave you an assignment, you better get it done and get it done on time. And he was unbelievably organized. I always remember he didn't have a bunch of pictures on the wall. He had files, tacked to the wall, and he was organized through and through, and that was a real good learning experience for me. And he was a heck of a coach, and both a practice coach and game coach. And the other thing was he used his assistants, and I thought that was really good. He was constantly talking to the assistants, whether he was sitting on the bench or standing. And the other thing that I learned from him, Corey, is he had a Pepsi, okay, right, on the scorer's table. So that's why I think I learned that. I always had the Coke right on the scoring table.
I like it. So Coach, we've jumped around everywhere here. We've got high school, we've got AAU, we've got Division I assistant, Division I interim head coach, back to high school, AAU again there. So where did you, how did you get in the D2 world, which is kind of what I know you for? How did you get to Florida Southern?
Well, being involved in NCAA inquiry, I don't know that I necessarily had a 5-year show cause as they have today, but it wasn't going to be easy for me to get back into Division I. And I knew that. But the AAU team was, Team Florida was so successful, winning those 2 national championships. We actually had newspapers around the state with beat writers that that
Covering an
covered
AAU
us.
team. How about that?
We had beat writers that came with us, in the national tournament. And then in 1983, USA Basketball asked me to take an AAU team to the Soviet Union. So in 1983, I was, and that, the Soviet Union, the Olympics were in Moscow in 80, and then in LA in 84. The United States boycotted the Olympics in 80. No American team had been to the Soviet Union since somewhere midway in the 70s. So I took an AAU All-Star team that had some guys you would know, Kenny Smith, Tommy Amaker, Bruce Dalrymple, who played at Georgia Tech. And we were 3 weeks in the Soviet Union, and the purpose, what the Soviets wanted, is they wanted their under 20 team to play against good competition before they went to the European Championships. And so that's the reason we were brought over there. We played other teams, but we played them in the infamous Red Army complex in Moscow. Right. And they destroyed us. Okay, they beat us bad. We won other games in the Soviet Union on that tour, but boy, the national team beat us pretty bad. And they had these guys. They had 19-year-old Sabonis, Arvydas, and so a lot of people say, boy, I really would have liked to have seen Sabonis when he was younger. I saw him when he was younger, okay? And so did Kenny Smith, and so did Tommy Amaker and those guys that were on that trip. They also had Alexander Volkov, who I think played for the Hawks.
Yep.
They had Šarūnas Marčiulionis, who played, in the NBA. So, they were really good.
And Omisius. Yeah, that was a team that was stacked.
They were really good.
Man, that's
awesome. And so I can remember this story, though. When I came back, what we did in preparation, we met in Boston for 3 days, and then and the Boston BABC guys, Leo Papillo and those guys, they helped us, with the training and everything, and then we flew over there. So we only practiced for 3 days, so we weren't really ready. I remember when I came back, I sent a letter to USA Basketball, and C.M. Newton was in charge at the time. And I just said, no American team, all-star team, can go anymore to Europe and play. Just put a team together and we go play. And that had kind of always been the way even some of the Olympic teams had been. You just put a team together and we go, we're Americans and we're going to win. We got beat bad. It was like, 90 to 68, type stuff. But the thing that I remember the most about the trip to the Soviet Union, is kind of interesting in the political world that we're in now. When we stood up there and they had all those, the hammer and sickle, banners all over the gym. When we stood up in '83 and they played the national anthem, that was a cool thing. That was really cool. The two anthems back to back, so that whenever I hear stuff about the flag, I understand, I understand everything about those issues, but I can just tell you this: being in a foreign country and playing the national anthem, that's a neat thing, because you realize how great it is in our country.
There you go, Coach. Yeah, expand on that a little bit more, because you're talking about, you say cool and neat stuff, but it's a sense of pride there in your country, right?
Exactly. And one of the things that I've noticed, going around, and doing camps all over the world, is pride in the success of the athletic teams by individual countries is a big thing. The pride of somebody that is successful in the Olympics, in any one of the Olympic sports, that's a big thing.
Whatever sport. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A cyclist from Belgium, a gymnast from Germany or something. It's such a big thing. And I just, that's one thing that I think a lot of people don't realize in the issue that's going on about the flag. If you're in a foreign country and they play the national anthem, and you watch how their people react to their national anthem, I mean, it's an interesting thing to see.
And you felt that there in '83. This is the Off the Beaten Path podcast, and you've taken us way off the beaten path here. We could do a whole episode on '83 trip for 3 weeks in the U.S.S.R. I'd love to hear more about that as we go forward. But you mentioned camps all over the world. What are some other off the beaten path camps and places that you visited through hoops before we come back to Florida Southern?
Here's an interesting thing, Dan and Corey. I had this, I don't know how I came up with it, but I kind of came up with this idea. If anybody, I think it was probably when I was at USF, you'd get calls into the office, and the secretary, they weren't important calls, so the secretary would send them to my phone. Okay. And it would be like a guy from, calling from the Republic of Panama or something. And so I used to always say, hey, look, I'll help you any way you want. And then my only thing that I'd like is if you'll bring me back to your country. So I kind of kept that philosophy all the way through. Anytime I would help a group that was coming over here, a travel group that wanted to get a couple of games in the USA, this or that or the other, I would always say, yeah, we'll definitely help you. And hey, invite me back.
Yeah, exactly. You invited yourself to their country. Well done. Well played.
Coach, give us some of those countries. I mean, I know Germany, Belgium, Martinique. Give us some more.
France. I've been to France several times. I've been to Estonia. Okay. And what was neat about that, I went to Estonia. I can't remember exactly the year, but it was somewhere like 2010 or something like that. And then with my son Jay being at South Carolina, they had an Estonian player the last 4 years.
Wow. So
I could talk to him about some of the places that we sight saw when we were there. But
and
another part of what I call my so-called legacy, which I say Team Florida and AAU is a big part of it, but I've been doing a camp in Fort-de-France, Martinique. Last year was the 25th year. And this year, of course, because of the virus, it was canceled. But I've been going there. I also go to St. Martin, the French part. The island of St. Martin's cut into two pieces. One is Dutch and one is French. So that's another place that I've been. But I think kind of my philosophy was we would host a group over here, and then maybe you bring me back at a particular time, and that's kind of worked out, and it's helped me travel. I've been to Israel, I've been to Greece, all through basketball. Everywhere I've been in the world outside of the United States has been because of basketball.
There you go. Is there a moment, a favorite place, a food, a player along the way that you can kind of highlight for us there?
Well, I know we took Team Florida to the Republic of Panama, and I want to say 1982, and that was Otis Smith, Horace Broadnax was on that team. But anyway, when we're walking up to the facility, they had all these grills, and sitting out, and guys were grilling, and they would sell meat on the stick. So the guys would say something like, "Hey, what do you got? You know, what is on that stick? It smells good." Okay.
Ooh.
And of course, the guys didn't speak any English. So finally, we got an interpreter, and it was dog on those sticks.
Oh, smells good. Nasty, nasty.
Smells good.
Coach, you're all over the place. We love this, from the high school to the college to the AAU and Team Florida. And we'll come back to the legacy moments that you've already referenced. But any pro coaching for you in your extensive career? What kind of pros have you worked with and for?
Well, you know, I got to tell you another funny story that I didn't include. When I was a Jesuit in 1975, Thanksgiving weekend, the head coach at the junior college, Hillsborough Community College, got let go. And so that year, so it would have been 74, 75, I coached the high school team and the college team at the same time. Now,
Wow.
now in today's day, you know, guys have 2 or 3 different AAU teams. And so, you know, they might do that. But you got to look at it. I mean, I had teaching responsibilities. Okay.
Did you ever sleep?
And so I remember going in and kind of a little nervous and asking the principal, because, you know, now I've been coaching for 5 years. I got a chance. If I do a good job, maybe I get this job at Hillsborough Community College. Mm-hmm. So I asked the principal, and the principal said, yeah, if it doesn't, you know, it just, you know, you can't go to one of their games if we have a game. So I would practice. Okay. And you know me, Corey, I was always a long practicer. Okay. I go from 3 to 5:36. Then I get in my car and go across town in Tampa, and not that far, 15 or 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever. And then I would coach from 7 to 10, and then pick up a Cuban sandwich on the way home. And so that was that year. That was the year Holly was born. My daughter Holly was born in 75.
Wow.
And I was coaching 2 teams. So that kind of helped me with coaching Tampa Catholic and Team Florida at the same time, even though their seasons were different. You know, you just move from the regular high school season on into the travel season. Mm-hmm. But in 70 or in 86, one of my former U.S.F players was named the head coach of an expansion USBL team in Tampa called the Tampa Bay Flash.
The Flash.
And he had never coached. Okay, he had played a couple of years, you know, in Europe, and he knew somehow he made a connection with the guys that owned the Flash. They were New York City guys. So anyway, he called me up and he said, "Coach, can you help me?" And I said, yeah, I'll be glad to help you. So I rolled in that first year in 86 and we did a little prep, you know, it was a couple months preparation, getting the players and this and that and the other. And we took mostly, here's what USBL was. You took the best players from the CBA, and then you would try to get some really good college guys that were trying to enhance themselves with either the pro draft or whatever. So, you know, the talent was pretty good. So after about 3 days of practice, Tony Greer was the player's name. He said, "Coach, I don't think I can do it. I got a couple other things I got to get done." So I took, you know, so now here I was the coach. And again, I had to go to my principal at the high school and say who was really a good guy in the AD. And I said, "Look, now I'll be able to do this, but I mean, I'll be able to take care of all my responsibilities." So that was really, really neat. And when I first got that job, you know, that was coming off of 5 years with Team Florida, but now I got pros. So with Team Florida, I had the best players in the state, all Division I guys pretty much. But now I had pros. All right, what's going to happen? So I met with Bill Musselman, who at the time was coaching a CBA team in Sarasota called the Sarasota Stingers.
Right.
This was, I think it was after he had been at Albany, Albany Patroons. He had those great years with Albany, and I think he had a run in there and turned it over to Phil Jackson, but can't remember the exact thing on that. But anyway, he lived in Sarasota and was really good friends with a friend of mine. So I went down and met with him, had dinner with him, and I asked him, all right, I've coached, at a lot of levels, but I've never coached pros. He said, Coach, you just coach them like you've always coached. Just coach them like you've always coached.
Great advice, right?
And he said, you'll be fine. He said, they're only a year or two older than the college guys you had. They're the same. They're immature. They're irresponsible. They're all those things. Now, what he did say is, you don't treat everybody the same. Okay. If you have a great one, okay, then, you're not letting him get away with stuff, but you also got to understand that. And so that was, and you guys will love this story. We had a fine system. If guys were late for practice, they got fined. You didn't lose your starting job, or you weren't, suspended for a week. Okay. And if you missed practice, okay, you were fined. So we had, and this guy's the best player that I've ever been around myself, okay, that I've ever coached. This is the best player I've ever coached at any level. And his name was Don Collins, and he played at Washington State and then was drafted by the Hawks, and had some problems with substance abuse, and he was in the USBL to try to enhance, get back.
Right.
And but I mean, he was an all-star level NBA player, and it was just unbelievable. In the fourth quarter of a game, side screen and roll, kind of like Houston would do a high screen and roll, with Harden. I would just give him the ball on the left side, and he would just score every time. I mean, it was just, it was that good. I've never had that at any other level where you had a player and you knew in the fourth quarter.
Do it.
So you coach.
He was. It was a great experience dealing with him. Okay, number one, he never came to shoot around on game day. Okay, and when he would come before the game, he would just put his fine money in the fine dish. Okay, and that was always the money we used after the game when the team would go to a particular hangout. Okay, I don't think they exactly do it that way in the NBA, but in the CBA and the USBL, you had a hangout in your town. And so anyway, that was Don Collins, and he was the major contributor to the first round whenever we'd head out after a game. But that first year we won the league, and I was USBL Coach of the Year. And
new place, great year. It's all you, man.
Right. It all started with the advice from Coach Musselman, but we also had Mitchell Wiggins, whose son plays in the league now, and he was a really good player for Houston prior, and he was trying to get his life back in order at that time. And then we had just really good players. So the USBL was a great league, and it was at the right time. The problem with both the CBA and the USBL was the NBA never put any money in it. Now the G League, has made it because the NBA finally realized there's so many guys out there that need continued development, or maybe people missed on them. And I mean, look at some of the guys that have made it in the NBA just this year that have come out of the D League. you know, with that 1 or 2 extra years or, you know, whatever to become better players.
Right. No, that's a
Another
really
coach.
good point. Fully funded now versus what it was before.
Right.
Coach, you mentioned a couple of these guys that were trying to put their life back together. For you, coaching players who are looking for that second opportunity, is it harder? Is it a big challenge? Is it a pain in the butt to have to deal with that? Or do you thrive with those kind of players that are busting their tail with
I think the big thing is you're mentoring them, and they are a little bit, you know, the good players are a little bit older, and you're mentoring them. And the younger ones, the rookies, the guys coming right out of college, you're treating them just like you treated a college guy.
All right.
But the vets that have made it, that are having those kind of problems, here's what you're always telling them. Okay. Everybody's looking at your behavior. Okay. They want to see if you've changed. Okay. So what are you going to do to change, you know, while you're here? Okay. Maybe it's work harder in practice. Okay. Maybe it's always be on time, you know, and say, look, if you're late or something, you're going to get fined, whatever the policy is. But how about just being a better person? And that's usually the way, you know, you take advantage of a second chance. So I think that was kind of neat for me to have a chance to work with guys like that. And then you can use those examples when you talk to younger players.
Right.
You know, there's a guy, he's an NBA All-Star. He made some bad choices, and you know, and as a result, nobody even knows his name.
So, Coach, we go through it. Mitchell Wiggins was a Truett McConnell guy.
That's right.
They don't. I don't think they claim him anymore because of him getting banned from the NBA. He was the first player ever officially banned from the
Right.
NBA. But he was.
You know, they came in. The NBA would send guys in, and they would drug test them 2 or 3 times a week while they were playing USBL. And
unbelievable.
so, you know,
Unbelievable play. All right, Coach. So let's look at this. We're going off the beaten path, and man, we've been all over it. So you're a high school coach. You're a D1 assistant, a D1 head coach, a D1 assistant, back to high school head coach, JUCO head coach while doing it, USBL head coach, run Team Florida AAU, and you also did some CBA and ABA stuff. So you've hit almost every off the beaten path pro league while going to all these other countries and working. But the 2 things we haven't gotten, and they'll probably be our show enders here, are the 2 places you're in the Hall of Fame in one of them and should be in the other, but is Florida Southern and Clayton State, where I got to meet you. But at these 2 places, you had, you know, other than great assistants, obviously, you had some unbelievable runs and unbelievable players. And, you know, you're known, even though you're one of the highest winning percentages at in the CBA history, you're also one of the highest winning percentages in D2 at 2 places that are polar opposites. So kind of walk us through the traditional powerhouse, Florida Southern, kind of like the Carolina, Duke, Kansas type of D2, and then the Clayton State, where you took a bunch of nobodies and kind of, as far as the D2 map was concerned, and got us ranked every year you were there that I know of. So kind of walk us through all that.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of interesting when you look at it. I was 25 years a Division II coach, so all the stuff we've talked about before, now it's 25 more years of this. So that was all before I went to Florida Southern. But I wouldn't have gotten the opportunity at Florida Southern if it hadn't have been for probably the combination of Team Florida and the USBL. I got to know George Schultz, who was the head coach at Florida Southern, and he was a young guy who had been an assistant for Norm Stewart at Missouri and some of the really good Missouri teams. And George was a really successful, sharp coach and had really come in to a really good program, Florida Southern, and really kept it right there on the national map. But he was very, very ambitious. He was a young guy in his 30s. I was a little bit older, and I mean, he wanted one of the big jobs. Okay. I mean, he was a Rick Pitino-ish kind of guy that had, some rough things happened to him in his career after that. But he brought me in because, I really think he brought me in because of the team Florida and the connections that I would have in recruiting in the state. And he had an opening. So my first year there, I lived in Tampa and commuted to Lakeland, which was about 50 miles. And I did that, and I worked for him as an assistant for 2 years. The first year was 85, 86. We were ranked number 1 in the country. So here I come in on a team that's ranked number 1 in the country, and we get to the semifinals, the Final Four. And back then, Division II was Final Four. So you had to win a regional and then a sectional, I think is what it was called. So we hosted the regional finals and won, and then we go to Springfield for the Final Four. But anyway, he was a hot commodity, March Madness thing. Even though he was Division II head coach with his background, he'd been with Cliff Ellis at South Alabama and then Norm Stewart. So there were jobs that he was involved in, Illinois State and places like that where he was a finalist. Well, anyway, I'm with him for 2 years, and then he ends up taking a job with the Orlando Magic. And he took that job in August of 1970. Of 1990. And he took that job, and he just said, Coach, I'm going to recommend that they hire you. And so it was August, and the AD said, well, I guess I got no choice. And the AD named me interim. Well, we won our first 18 games. And
first year.
So, like I told you, everywhere I went, I had good players. And of course, I had been there with those guys. And we won our first 18. But listen to some of the places we won. We won at Alaska Anchorage.
Wow. And
the week before, they had beat UCLA in the Great Alaska Shootout. Okay, so, I will have to say this, and I think the particular coach that was there at the time had only lost like 2 or 3 games at Alaska Anchorage. They played the shootout in the big Coliseum, but then they play their regular games on campus. And I think the coach had only lost 1 game in, 8 years or something like that. We go in there and win. Mm-hmm. And I can remember telling the guys in the huddles down the stretch, okay, here's the deal. They will not call any fouls on them. And the only way we're getting out of here is you guys got to make shots. Okay. If you don't make shots, they are not blowing the whistle and putting you on the line. Okay. Because the 3 referees probably refereed every game for that guy. So anyway, that's probably one of my all-time wins, because I really think coming back, and then we went and played Fairbanks and won up there. So we went to Alaska and won 2, and most D2s didn't go to Alaska and win.
Right.
So
most D2s don't go to Alaska.
Right.
Talk about off the beaten path. And wait, and Florida, and from Florida to Alaska.
Right. We had Florida guys, from the country in Florida that had A, never flown, and B, never been in temperature below 38 degrees.
What's this white stuff, Coach?
I remember there was we were in a hotel in Anchorage, and snow was coming through the cracks in the window. Snow and ice through the cracks. That's how cold it was, coming through the cracks in the window.
Wow. So, Coach, how long were you at Florida Southern as a head coach? I know you were there 2 years as an assistant. How long were you the head coach?
10 years.
10 years. From 90 to 2000?
Right. Now listen to that era. Okay. It is the best era of any NCAA team, 10-year or decade of any team in the history of Florida basketball.
Wow.
We won, I don't know, 240, whatever it was, I don't know, 250 games or something in that 10-year period.
Coach, 246.
Yeah, something like that. And
Wow.
we won in the 10-year period. We won the conference or the conference tournament in 8 of the 10 years. Okay, now here's what I always say to people. If you are in a league and you are the best program in your league, meaning best fans, most money, best, situation, you should finish first, second, or third in your league every year. Okay. That's what Florida Southern was. I don't know. I think it's maybe one of the 4 or 5 best programs in the country in terms of that. Just a natural fan base, money that you can raise from that fan base, and facilities and school and everything. So, and we won that year. We won our first 18 games, but I inherited a really good team. But more than that, I came into a really good program where.
So, Coach,
I mean, go ahead.
I got to stop you. So that's a great segue. You're at a place, great arena, great support, great money, and then you end up at Clayton State, where I don't know if we had more than 5 fans that came to most games. Now, you had some other folks, but I don't want to kill it because it's a great place. My alum, I love it. But, man, you talk about the polar opposite.
I remember, Corey, we had our closet office, but people would walk in the door by our closet office and they would go to a
Smart Bodies.
Yeah, a workout area, like a gymnasium. What am I?
Kind of like it was the Curves version of Curves for older people. I worked at it, so I knew. Yeah.
Right. And they would walk by our office every day, and I remember saying to Corey one day, I've been here for 3 or 4 months, and no, not one person has come by and asked anything about basketball. I mean, not one person. We had been there like 4 months, and nobody asked one thing about basketball. But the other thing, so
people have to understand is that closet office that you guys keep talking about is the first open door in the building. When people walk in, it's like almost a receptionist desk. They can't not see you. Nobody cares, huh? Nobody.
Remember, Corey, we put up these bulletin boards, and we Corey would be out there. We were tacking up stuff on the bulletin board. Nobody ever looked at them. They'd walk right by. I called them Martians. Okay. They would just walk by. Nobody ever asked. And then the only thing we did have is we'd all about every 2 or 3 weeks somebody come in and say, "Hey, you guys need any help on your coaching staff?" Okay. Remember the guy Mo Reese?
Yeah. Division I player from Morrow. He kind of came around, and I think we thought he was going to help us. Right. And I guess he got another gig.
But how about this? We had the smallest training room. You couldn't even fit more than 2 tables into the training room. Okay.
Yeah, if you wanted your ankle tape, you had to sit out in the hallway.
And
put your ankle in the training room.
Put the chair up. And then the locker room, okay, was like a PE lockers, the 2-level PE lockers.
Yeah.
And it wasn't ours. Okay. It was us and track and cross country.
And soccer.
We had no locker.
Why don't y'all have names on your locker? And I said, well, it's because 3 sports use it. What do you mean? Coach was killing. What?
Okay. So go from there. Go from the tiniest training room in the country to the closet office to the shared locker room, but you build a program and success is there on the court? How did that all come about? How did you do that?
Well, a lot was, I think a lot of it was, it's very, very hard to come into a new area. You know, a lot of times when I see coaches take jobs, you know, they're a head coach at Nevada and they come to Georgia. Okay. Well, here I was, a Florida guy.
For example.
Right. A Florida guy. And I come to Atlanta. I didn't know one person. So being able to keep Corey on the staff was really, really important. And then bring in somebody with me that kind of, you know, knew the operation that we wanted to try to do that. So we had in my 12 years at Clayton State, we had good coaches, you know, helping me out, and it wouldn't have worked if it hadn't been that. Then the second thing we had, our athletic director was really a good guy. Okay, and I mean, he really was a good guy, and he was one of those athletic directors that if you went to him, he would try to do anything he could to help you. And a lot of ADs out there aren't that way, and he was that way. And the only thing that I used to argue with him about, I used to say, Mason, his name is Mason Barfield. I used to say, Mason, we want to tell everybody we're like a Division I. And he didn't really like that because he was a realist. He said, we're not like a Division I. But in recruiting, you have to say that, you know, and you have to try to achieve that. And I know you probably have done the same thing with, you know, in your years, Corey, as a junior college coach. You want the guys to think they're coming to the best program they can come to in your particular level based on their needs. Because Division II, which a lot of people don't know, it's Division I players playing at a Division II. And the reason they are at a Division II, there are a assortment of reasons. One is a late developer, okay, maybe played football, you know, in high school and really didn't get seen on the circuit. Maybe they had an injury, maybe academically. Those are all things. But you can't win at the Division II level if you don't have a Division I players.
That's really good insight. D2 is a lot of D1 level players with some of those factors that come into play. Nice.
And then where recruiting comes in, and Corey was really perceptive of this at a young age, is you got to get really good players, but they got to be guys that can come in and take the coaching and fit in. You know, you can't take a really good player who's going to come in and be a distraction. So the recruiting, I think, in a lot of cases is even harder than it is at the higher levels.
And that was the one thing I was going to say. I thought Coach did a great job at when he came, he sold Atlanta a lot in recruiting. He sold his track record, you know, 10 years D2 plus all the previous pro, off the beaten path pro places. And he was able to make it look, you know, like everybody wanted to come there, you know, when we would meet. And we used to always say, if we could get the player on campus, Coach would sell them, you know, and then he did.
So yeah, those were good there. The one thing I do want to say about Clayton State and the Peach Belt Conference is, you know, when I came from the Sunshine State Conference, we were just better than everybody else. When I came to the Peach Belt, what I couldn't believe was how good everybody was. I said, Corey, these teams I'm watching film, these teams are really good.
Level of the league, huh? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, level of the league. And then here's another thing: in the Sunshine State Conference, no coaches got fired. Guys were there. They were just coaching that team. They were there. There's two guys that are still there from when I was there in the 90s. They're still there. Well, I come to the Peach Belt. 11 coaches in my first 8 years. 11 coaches got fired at different schools in the Peach Belt for not winning. I couldn't believe it. I said, I thought once one at Division II, it's not the easiest thing in the world, but guys got me. And our league was very, very competitive. And
Coach, tell them one time I think we had eight or nine of the 12 coaches were either Division I head coaches at one time or coached in Final Fours in Division II. Some both. Wasn't it like that, Coach?
No, there were 8 guys that had been Division I head coaches, or who had coached in a Elite 8 in Division II, and coaching in the daggum Peach Belt at state schools. Because state schools, you can pretty much get 10, 11, 12 really good players. Private schools sometimes scholarships are limited. It might not be as easy, but yeah, I really enjoyed the building of the Clayton State program. The thing that's really tough for coaches in coaching is when you have administrative changes. And you're brought there to do a certain job, and then you have administrative changes. And by that, I mean you lose an athletic director, or you lose a president, or changes are made in the universities, who's responsible for what, and those things. And that made it a tough thing. And then the other thing that I went through at Clayton State that I thought was interesting is the last 5 years I was there, our women's program was the best program in the country. Our women's program was the best in the country. And there were reasons why: really good coaching and system that they played and so forth. But and I see it a little bit at the University of South Carolina, and I saw it a little bit at the University of Connecticut at UConn. When the women's program is the best in the country, people kind of look at the men's program, and and so I experienced that, and that's just another another thing that that's out there that you have to deal with as a coach.
Oh yeah, it can be a negative. It could be also a big challenge. But
right.
You also had the challenge of dealing with Corey on your staff for many of those years, and we got to take advantage of having both of you here on the podcast. You got to tell us and our listeners a good, entertaining, tough Corey story. Do you have a moment there of your assistant coach when he went off the rails or did something really good? What do you got, Coach Gibbons?
No, here's the thing that I always used to say about Corey is if somebody said something that he didn't agree with, okay, he would sometimes have a little bit of attitude, okay? All right.
Never.
So
even his boss, huh?
we win a big game, and never crossed the line, but just a little bit of attitude. So
stiff upper lip is what he used to call it.
We win a big game at Pembroke, and Corey had recruited the night before, so he had his car. So I let the team go back on the bus, and I went with him in the car, and we got into a little bit of a debate over a particular player, and no matter what I said, I couldn't I couldn't win that debate on the way back. But I always appreciated CB. One other CB story, and now that one of the trademarks of his teams are full court press, and that was something that he learned from. That was our system when we got to Clayton. Mm-hmm. But there are times where I would get a bit conservative, okay, and be a little softer with the press, all right. And Corey would just get in my ear, on the bench, but he'd put it this way: are we not pressing anymore? We don't press anymore. Is that our style? It's like, Yeah, all right, let's get in it. The double fist, let's go.
Had to know how to push the buttons there, Coach.
You're getting soft, Coach.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
Hey, so you got Corey there, but also in your coaching career, you got a chance to coach your kid. You mentioned Holly getting born. She was born back in '75 with the U.S.S.R coaching and the doubling up, but you got to coach your son Jay at Clayton and some Florida Southern. How was that? Was that a challenge? Was it a great father-son moment? Was it just one more player? What's it like coaching your
Well,
kid?
you know, in today's day and age, especially with travel team stuff, you see a lot more dads, coaching kids, and even back in my day, high school coaches coaching their son, that kind of thing happened. And you would see some of the guys across the country, coaches might say, "Well, I really don't want my son to coach my son, and I'd rather have somebody else." So I wasn't really sure as Jay was coming through high school. And, in Jay's senior year in high school, 1997, Kathleen had four or five, Kathleen High School in Lakeland had 4 or 5 major college athletes on that team. And just for your information, Corey, on one of the podcasts, that Kathleen team was voted, the 97 Kathleen team is the best basketball team ever in Polk County, including, against the Tracy McGrady's and some of the others. But anyway, Jay was the point guard on that really good team, and he was being recruited mid-major. Jacksonville University, Rice. There were other people involved. Those were 2 that the coaches were there all the time. And I happened to have a chance to talk. I'll bring the name up again. Dr. Glenn Wilkes' son, who had played for his dad at Stetson. And I asked him. I said, what do you think? I mean, what's your advice? You played for your dad. He says, I'm going to tell you this. He said, I played for my dad for 5 years. I saw him every day. I was with him every day. When I was a high school player and he was coaching college, I never saw my dad. Okay, he'd come home late at night. And, I'm off to school in the morning and this and that and the other. He said, it was the greatest time in my life. I got to play, I got to be with my dad every day. So, I came back and I said something to Jay about it. And about a week later, he came in and he said, Dad, I want to go to Florida Southern. I want to play for you. And now he was coming into a situation where we had really good players in his position. And he redshirted his freshman year and then didn't play much, in his real freshman, in his redshirt freshman year, but then went on to become a really, really, good college player. So yeah, I loved it, and we have that same relationship now.
That's awesome. Hey, Coach, let's as we close it up, I think one of the neatest things, kind of tying in with that, and kind of our last question here. You've had so many people work for you and play for you who are still in basketball today, including Jay, and I know you follow them a lot. With him at South Carolina. As an assistant, but you also, like myself, Joe Nyland, who I know is now an AD, but has had an unbelievable career. There's so many, I can't name them all, but you got a bunch of players who coach high schools in Florida and Georgia and all over the country. And I know you still do workouts and clinics and all these things, but is that kind of your teams now? Is it through all those guys, or do you still kind of, with some of the teams you work out and stuff, is that it? How does that kind of work, and why do you think people, I have my own reason, but why do you think people who work and play for you want to get into coaching so much? Because, man, you had a bunch.
Yeah, it's funny. In my Florida, my 13 years at Florida Southern, okay, and 10 as a head coach, not a lot of guys went into coaching. They all graduated, but a lot of them, there's a few, but all of a sudden we get to Clayton and we got a bunch of guys, and then guys that have worked for us over the years. I've got a guy that came down from West Virginia and was my assistant for 2 years at Tampa Catholic, got the head job at Tampa Catholic, and now he's been the head coach there for 30 years. So
Wow.
He's one of those guys that, was involved, but people like yourself. But I think when guys want to go into the business that you're in, whether it be your son or whether it be somebody you coach who's like a son, that's a real honor. Okay, that they saw the business when they were a player, and they really wanted to do it. And so I following all the different guys, Tony Campbell, who worked for you, and and a lot of the different guys. And then of course you got two of our former guys are in the NBA now.
Yeah.
Kevin Young, who I know you guys have had off the beaten path, but he's on the beaten path until now. He's in the bubble.
Yeah.
And then Tony Dukes, who you didn't coach, but you knew as a young player in Morrow, and he's now, with the Lakers. So that's cool. You have two guys, but I mean, whatever level they're coaching at, it's coaching basketball. It's the same game,
There you go.
And it's helping.
It comes down to that. It's basketball. And that's what we keep hearing on this podcast is people sharing that love of the people and love of the game of basketball. So Coach Gibbons, we could go on for hours and hours here, but we always like to say, you got any final thoughts that you'd like to share? Any messages you want to put out there?
Here's kind of, my thing. A lot of coaches say, I just do it for the kids. I just do it for the kids. Okay. My thing is, I don't think any of us just do it for the kids. Okay. I think we're teachers, and the lessons that we're teaching in basketball are the lessons that you learn when your program competes for championships. Okay. The lessons that you have to learn as a player when you're in a program that's competing for a championship is what moves you on. That's a big part of your education in life. One of the things I used to always get on parents about, they were going to not let their kid didn't do a chore or something, they were going to keep them away from basketball practice. No, basketball practice is a big part of your education. And then the other thing that I think I hold to is in coaching is no peaks and valleys. No peaks and valleys. We're going to be consistently really good, regardless of what happens. Injuries, unfortunate circumstances. It's no excuses, no peaks and valleys, and we're always going to be at this level. That's it.
I love it. All right, close us out there, sir. What you got us?
You got it. Well, first of all, Coach Gibbons, thank you for the stories off the beaten path, in the middle of the path, and at the top of the basketball world. It has been incredible to hear, going way back and taking it to today. So thank you for being with us.
I've really enjoyed it. I really enjoy all your podcasts. A great idea, and y'all are doing a really good job with it. So keep it up in these weird times in the pandemic.
Makes us feel good about it too, right, Corey? So
Right,
for all those out there who want to join in and follow along on social media, Instagram, Off Beaten Path Podcast. Also on Twitter, Off Beaten Path with the _. Go follow and like and join in the conversation. Thanks everybody for listening this episode of Coach Thornton Gibbons.
Yep. We appreciate you, Coach. Great job. And we're a show for those who want to coach, those who used to coach, those who are coaches, those who follow coaches, and those who hire and fire the coaches. Appreciate you.
All right. See you guys. All right.